Good morning, alien enthusiasts. Before we get going today, need to announce, I announced it yesterday, but nevertheless need to announce it for the alien fans out there, a new merch drop in case you're unaware of it. This is our new 3-Eye Atlas design. Check it out. Super cool. And not only that, we also have it on a hoodie. Oh yeah, check it out. So to re-emphasize, these garments are incredibly comfortable. They're just a step above your usual YouTuber merchandise quality. It just feels so much more comfortable against your skin than about any other t-shirt I own, including stuff that I bought at Cape Canaveral. If I have a choice between wearing sunline garments and wearing anything else, I'm wearing these. Man, they are fantastic. So if you're interested, all the details are in the description. That's enough of that. Let's talk about 3-Eye Atlas. Things have changed yet again. As I reported a couple of days ago, non-gravitational acceleration was now reported, has officially been reported for 3-Eye Atlas. It has now been confirmed after multiple observations have been made, downgraded slightly by about 1/3 or so. But even with that downgrading, we are seeing more non-gravitational acceleration, more of an adjustment in 3-Eye Atlas's speed and trajectory than any natural comet in history. At this kind of distance, the sun shouldn't be hot enough to excite the surface of 3-Eye Atlas to the degree to where you're going to have all of this explosive outgassing that would cause such a significant adjustment in its speed and trajectory after all of these months of this object not varying at all, not deviating off its course by even a slight amount. And that's backed up by hundreds of observations. So all of a sudden we have this abrupt change in speed and course. And if it were natural, we should have a massive cloud of dust and debris and a very obvious tail, because we're talking about over 10% of the mass of this object, billions of tons of gas and dust, debris, etc., must have explosively outgassed from this object in order to create the biggest NGA adjustment in history. So is this what happened? I'll bet you can guess the answer to that. No, it's not. Okay, I'll be honest, this surprises even me. Given the fact that 3-Eye Atlas was brightening as much as it did at the moment of perihelion, when the sun was heating it up the most, that to me indicated a lot of explosive outgassing happening all at once. And so therefore, there should have been a massive cloud of gas and debris and a very noticeable tail. However, on November 5th, 2 new images of the interstellar object 3-Eye Atlas were released, and they show a compact source of light without a clear cometary tail. The coma is not very different in morphology than its appearance in the Hubble Space Telescope on July 21st of this year, so almost no change whatsoever from what it looked like 3 months ago, and yet we had all of this non-gravitational acceleration. As Avi Loeb points out, quote, "This is surprising in view of NASA's JPL report of a non-gravitational acceleration normalized at a heliocentric value of 1 astronomical unit, a radial acceleration away from the sun of 1.1 times 10 to the negative 6th AU per day squared, and a transverse acceleration relative to the sun's direction of 3.7 times 10 to the negative 7th AU per day squared. Based on momentum conservation, Avi Loeb derived that the mass fraction lost during the perihelion passage of 3-Eye Atlas is larger than 13%. For a typical comet, this should have resulted in a massive coma with dust and gas that would have been pushed by the solar radiation pressure and the solar wind to shape of a typical cometary tail pointing away from the sun, and no such tail is visible in the new images from November 5th. In comparison, Avi Loeb included this image of the solar system's comet Lemon, taken by one of the telescopes that observed 3I Atlas 2 days ago. Lemon features a clear cometary tail pointing away from the sun as expected. So we need to be clear here. This is a major anomaly because the detected NGA should produce visible outgassing signatures under standard cometary physics. Let's go ahead and unpack why this bolsters an artificial origin case. Under natural cometary models, non-gravitational acceleration arises from asymmetric outgassing, jets of sublimating ices like carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, or water pushing the nucleus like a rocket. And for 3I Atlas's NGA levels, this requires a mass loss of 10 to 13% of the nucleus, about 3 to 4 trillion kilograms over the course of a month per momentum conservation laws, assuming force equals mass times the acceleration of the gas jets, which should be traveling at about 3 to 800 meters per second from cometary outgassing. So one would expect a massive coma about 10,000 to 100,000 kilometers long and brightening to the point to where even small telescopes should be able to pick it up. We should also see a tail, either anti-solar, which is typical of almost all comets, dust and gas pushed by solar radiation and pressure away from the sun, or a sunward jet, as we have seen from 3I Atlas. And this should also extend to a distance of at least 1,000 kilometers. There should also be debris, fragmentation from rapid sublimation, creating a hazy envelope. And we are seeing none of this. Instead, what we're seeing is a compact source of approximately a few arc seconds across, similar to pre-perihelion Hubble images. No tail or cloud, just a fuzzy halo, inconsistent with 150 to 500 kilograms per second worth of outgassing, and post-perihelion brightness. That's also very strange. Stable now at this distance, not spiking as predicted. Now, there was a lot of brightening as the object approached perihelion, but there still should be lots of post-perihelion brightness with this kind of NGA adjustment, but that just isn't happening. So this strains the natural explanation. Natural explanation requires perfect jet symmetry, all gas and dust canceling each other out with no net visibility, which is statistically improbable, less than 1% of a chance for chaotic comets, or perhaps a dark comet inactive with hydrogen outgassing being invisible. But 3I Atlas has already showed jets on its inbound travel towards perihelion, ruling this possibility out, whereas an artificial fit, non-gravitational acceleration from controlled propulsion, such as ion thrusters or photon sails, provides acceleration without messy outgassing. No tail or cloud, a clean exhaust such as ionized xenon, which is undetectable at optical wavelengths, and a thrust of approximately 330 kilonewtons is feasible with advanced technology. So Loeb's qualitative ranking, although he hasn't officially announced this, must jump from 4 out of 10 pre-images to 5 to 6 out of 10 at this point. Combined anomalies such as ecliptic alignment, nickel without iron, low inbound non-gravitational acceleration, and now with a missing tail gives about a 30 to 40% chance of a non-natural origin, up from 20%. Now, there are some counter arguments to be made here. For example, these images are ground-based from small telescopes, whereas space assets like James Webb or Hubble could reveal subtle infrared emissions. So Loeb is waiting for these, but still, subtle emissions should not be happening with this radical of a non-gravitational acceleration event. Also, you have delayed visibility. A tail might form on its way outbound, but if that's the case, momentum models predict that this gas and dust should be appearing now, not at some point in the future. There could also be some kind of exotic ices, or perhaps viewing geometry of some kind impacting this. But regardless, this absolutely strengthens the artificial case. According to Avi Loeb, quote, the absence suggests propulsion other than cometary evaporation, potentially an engine. It's the strongest evidence yet against a typical comet, pushing for urgent high-resolution data. For example, NASA's withheld high-rise Mars images. If the James Webb telescope shows nothing, the hypothesis goes mainstream. In other words, the idea of this thing being an artificial object will become a mainstream hypothesis, or at least it should. That said, this discovery becomes far more significant when you consider all of the other anomalies displayed so far by 3I Atlas and consider just how improbable all of them are combined. And I decided to do a Bayesian analysis of all of these anomalies to determine just how likely a natural explanation might be as opposed to an artificial one. And the results were astonishing. Okay, so now that we have that information, and now that we understand the significance of all of it as to just how implausible this is, this big of an adjustment in speed and trajectory of such a massive, heavy object with no visible evidence of it happening, no visible outgassing at all, at least as far as we can tell. If there is visible evidence, we can't see it with our telescopes, and that should simply be impossible. But that's just to start off with. If we pile on this unlikely occurrence with all of the other anomalies that 3I Atlas has demonstrated thus far, how likely is it that we're dealing with an artificial object? Well, I asked my new best friend Grok for a Bayesian analysis of the likelihood of an artificial point of origin for 3I Atlas, given all of the anomalies that we know about it at this point. Let me tell you something, the results were really shocking. Okay, first of all, let's go ahead and review the various anomalies. Number one, its retrograde trajectory is aligned to within 5 degrees with the ecliptic plane of the planets around the sun, with a likelihood of 0.2%, and its arrival time was fine-tuned to bring it within tens of millions of kilometers from Mars, Venus, and Jupiter, and also to be unobservable from Earth at perihelion with a likelihood of 0.005%. Now, on top of that, during July and August of 2025, it displayed a sunward jet, or an antitail, that is not an optical illusion from geometric perspective, unlike every other comet that we have ever observed in the past. Its nucleus is about 1 million times more massive than OUMUAMUA's and 1,000 times more massive than 2I Borisov, while moving faster than both with a likelihood of less than 0.1%. Its gas plume contains much more nickel than iron, as found in industrially produced nickel alloys, and a nickel to cyanide ratio that is orders of magnitude larger than of all known comets, including 2I Borisov, with a likelihood of below 1%. Its gas plume only contains 4% water by mass, which is a primary constituent of familiar comets. It shows negative light polarization, unprecedented for all known comets, including 2I Borisov. This negative polarization suggests a shape that is very uncomet-like, something that resembles the Centaur asteroid objects that we have in the outer solar system. Not a comet, Then it arrived from a direction coincident with the WOW signal within 9 degrees with a likelihood of 0.6%. Near perihelion, it brightened faster than any known comet and was bluer than the sun. And finally, it exhibits non-gravitational acceleration, which requires massive evaporation of at least 13% of its mass, and its preliminary post-perihelion images do not show evidence for that so far. By the way, if you're curious what perihelion and perigee means, perihelion means closest approach to the sun, hence the term helios, perihelios, close to the sun, whereas perigee, close to the earth, means close to Gaia, para-Gaia. So if you've ever been interested as to what those terms actually mean and where they came from, there you go. You're welcome. So here's Grok's Bayesian analysis. First of all, the low inbound non-gravitational acceleration, virtually none observable in spite of obvious outgassing. It assigns a chance of 1 in 10,000 to be happening for months and months without any evidence of any NGA. And then, secondly, nickel vapor without iron, a 1 in 1,000 chance, an industrial signature with no new data suggesting a natural point of origin, then an ecliptic alignment plus multiplanetary flybys. These two anomalies combined have a 1 in 500,000 chance of happening purely randomly. Then there's the chance of the sun being between Earth and 3I Atlas at the moment of perihelion, which is about a 10% chance, and then you have this spike of non-gravitational acceleration with no tail or cloud. It gives it a 1 in 10,000 chance of happening randomly. It requires improbable cancellation, in other words, proportional outgassing that creates no obvious tail and no obvious sign of outgassing or sublimation. So the total Bayes factor is 10,000 times 1,000 times 500,000 times 8 times 10,000, or 4 times 10 to the 13th power chances against. In other words, the odds are 40 trillion to 1 against that all of these things could happen purely by chance. And it assigns a 99.9999999975% chance of it being artificial. Overwhelming support for an artificial point of origin. Natural models now require 10 trillion coincidences, perfect symmetry, exotic ices, random alignment, all of these things. Whereas Loeb's chances of a 4 to 5 on his Loeb scale gives it a 30 to 50% chance of being artificial is conservative. Bayesian quantifies the data's evidential weight far more aggressively. So this update, as far as Grok is concerned, suggests that the no tail after non-gravitational acceleration is the smoking gun. Natural outgassing should be obvious, but it isn't, and the data overwhelmingly favors an artificial point of origin. But before we assign too much significance to this Bayesian calculation, we need to take into account that just because one explanation is overwhelmingly unlikely, that doesn't mean that the other explanation is almost certainly true. We don't have a lot of solid evidence for an artificial point of origin, only that 3I Atlas does not seem to be natural, at least not natural in any way that we have seen in nature before. So I don't want to overstate this. The Bayesian calculation that's been made here is just pure mathematics. In terms of other factors that Grok, I'm sure, is not taking into account, the extreme likelihood or unlikelihood, shall we say, of an artificial object entering our solar system at random or just happens to be entering at this particular time while we're watching it, something that has never happened before, at least not to our knowledge, although OUMUAMUA was very probably an artificial object as well, as far as I'm concerned. There are definitely other factors that need to be taken into account with this Bayesian probability. I do not personally believe that there's a 99.99, etc., 8 nines after that chance of this object being an artificial object. I think that that's really overstating things. But nevertheless, given the fact that these statistics exist at all, given the fact that Grok, which has no dog in this fight, has no reason to be biased about any of this, is coming up with these kinds of statistical probabilities, that's something to be taken very seriously. At the very least, we need to consider the possibility of this being an artificial object, not a spaceship, as so many of the skeptics like to call it. You know, every time they talk about the artificial theories for 3I Atlas, they call it an alien spaceship. And, you know, but that brings to mind a giant flying saucer or a star destroyer or something along those lines. No, I don't think 3I Atlas is anything like that. Obviously, given the fact that it has a coma with a hell of a lot of material in that coma, which is very similar to what a comet would have, it's not your everyday spaceship. But at the same time, I think it's very possible that this might be an asteroid ship or a comet ship, if you will. As a matter of fact, the light polarization from this object suggests that that might be exactly what it is. The polarization is more similar to the Centaur objects, the asteroid-like objects that exist in the outer solar system, which are not comets and they're not typical asteroids either, but something different. And yes, if we had an asteroid ship of some kind, then it might very well appear like this. And it would have a coma because it would have accumulated a lot of dust on its long journey from star to star. There would be plenty of reasons for this thing to have a very noticeable coma as it was making its way through the solar system. And also, if the whole dark forest hypothesis is correct, if alien species are doing their best to not be noticed as they're making their way through solar systems that might be occupied by intelligent and potentially dangerous civilizations, and yes, they're going to try to masquerade as a natural object like a comet. And there are those who say, well, if that was the case, why would they try to be so noticeable? And why are there so many imperfections in this disguise, so many anomalies with it compared to the real thing? Doesn't make any sense. These aliens seem to be doing a very bad job of concealing themselves if that is their objective. Are they really? Seems to me that it's doing a fantastic job because as of now, well over 90% of the astronomers on Earth believe that this is a natural object, angrily insist that it is a natural object. It seems to me that if the aliens are trying to fool us, trying to masquerade as a comet, knowing that they're going to be able to get away with it, well, yeah, I would say they've done a hell of a job. I would say the 3I Atlas will make its way out of the solar system, its mission being accomplished, whatever that mission might be, and we will be none the wiser because of our narrow-minded views when it comes to alien civilizations and what might constitute a techno signature. So yeah, well done, guys. I think you've succeeded. I think that if this is an artificial object or has some artificial aspects to it, it will leave the solar system, its job done, with us still insisting that it was a natural object and there's nothing to see here, and angrily dismissing anybody who says otherwise. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also please consider supporting this channel on Patreon or with a merch purchase. Again, you can find all the details in the description. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, stay angry about space.